This program was made possible by the contributions of viewers like you, the Friends of Seven. Thank you. Additional funds provided by the Reynolds, Alberta Museum, presenting an outstanding collection of vehicles, aircraft, agricultural equipment, and industrial giants.
It was a magical time filled with daring adventure.
The planes were primitive, my goodness. It was all flying by the seat of your pants.
When heroes wore leather helmets, jodhpur pants, and walked on wings.
They were the equivalent of our sports stars, our rock stars, our movie stars today.
When it was still possible to be really first at something. First across America. First across the Atlantic.
After 41 hours in the air, Clyde Pangborn and Hugh Herndon have successfully flown across the Pacific, non-stop.
This is about a man all but forgotten by history. Daredevil, adventurer, pioneer, Clyde Upside Down Pangborn.
He's probably the most underappreciated, least recognizable superstar aviator of the times.
In 1931, Clyde Pangborn and Hugh Herndon did what no one had done before, fly non-stop across the Pacific, marking one of the great aviation milestones.
You're driving me crazy, in love but I'm lazy. How I want to praise thee, how I just want to dance.
If there is such a thing as fate, then Clyde Pangborn came along at the exact moment to fulfill his destiny. Pang was a man of his time, complicated, good-looking, a ladies' man.
He was a pilot's pilot.
He was every bit the pilot that Charles Lindbergh or Jimmy Doolittle or any of the other great pilots that people recognize.
Pang lived to fly, relentlessly pushing the aviation envelope. When he set his mind to do something, he invariably succeeded. His accomplishments spanned a lifetime of aviation history.
He had to be a daredevil. He may have looked calm, but my goodness, you couldn't have done those kind of things without iron nerve.
Pangborn clearly had a real independent streak.
Is at war with Germany.
He liked to do things his way. He clearly craved adventure. And throughout his life, he made a series of choices to always pursue his dreams, what most energized him in life, which was clearly flying.
Trained as a civil engineer, Pang paid meticulous attention to detail. This trait, along with his quiet, confident nature, was a vivid contrast to his flamboyant, colorful career and lifestyle.
He seems to sort of embody that spirit that we like to think of as of the West, the strong, silent type, the man who is true to his word, almost a larger-than-life figure in many respects because of his accomplishments and because of what people thought of him.
The dawn of the 20th century was in sight when Clyde Edward Pangborn was born. Horse-drawn carriages competed with noisy, dusty, unreliable gadgets called automobiles. Birds and clouds were the only things in the sky. Clyde's parents divorced early in his life. His brother Percy and father remained on a ranch near Wenatchee, Washington. Clyde and his mother moved to the small logging town of St. Mary's in North Idaho. Even as a small boy, Pang wanted to fly.
It seemed like from an early age, Pangborn loved heights, he loved adventure.
He evidently saw an early aviator fly into St. Mary's and was just so taken by the idea of going up into the air that from that moment on, he was determined to become a pilot.
Clyde's mother would later write of the incident.
Clyde wanted to fly it right then and there, and he hung around the plane constantly until he left.
I think like a lot of young boys growing up shortly before World War I, this idea of an airplane held a tremendous fascination.
I really lost sleep when Clyde, as a boy, built a makeshift plane and wrecked it near our St. Mary's home. He built a campfire near the wreckage and stayed there all night long.
Over there, send the word over there.
Pang learned to fly when he joined the Army Signal Corps during World War I. Aviation was barely 10 years old at the time.
And we won't come back till it's over there.
Sing a song all day long. Can't go wrong when you sing a song.
The military is where Pang met his first true love, a Curtiss JN-4D Jenny. Basically, a flying birdcage. He knew her inside and out.
They had to know engines. They had to be mechanics in those days. They had to do everything themselves.
The type of flying he did was flying rickety old biplanes, engines that had a life expectancy of about 120 hours, forced landings all the time. He had skills that were way out there at the edge of what people could do.
Pangborn was a natural pilot. After mastering loops and tailspins, Pang couldn't resist more challenging aerobatic stunts.
He took particular delight in flying so low that he could roll the Jenny's wheels on his commanding officer's quarters, or play leapfrog over the hangars, and sometimes fly through them. These persistent, nerve-wracking stunts earned Pang the reputation as one of Peck's bad boys of the air service.
By the end of the war in 1919, aviation had proved itself an invaluable and effective tool of war. Now in peace, with the country entering the roaring 20s, there was a glut of surplus planes, a newfound fascination with flying, and an elite group of aviators, the Barnstormers.
He was a daredevil. He would fly down the main street of town upside down about 20 feet off the tops of the buildings just to let his mom know he was in town.
Country hicks, like we all were at that time, were pretty excited to see somebody actually turning a plane over and flying it upside down, walking on wings and that kind of thing. That was really big-time entertainment.
In order to make money, they would hop from small community to small community, and that's where the barnstorming name came from. These men would fly in low over a farmer's barn looking for a field that was safe to land in. Then they would set up to give rides and to do aerial acrobatics above the town.
Every schoolboy in town was wearing a leather helmet, you know, just like Lindy did.
Pangborn did every stunt imaginable, walk on wings, change planes in midair, perform the death-cheating breakaway.
He was a tremendous athlete. He must have had a grip of steel because in one afternoon when he was barnstorming, he set a world's record by doing airplane-to-airplane exchanges 21 times in a row with no parachute.
But Pang's signature stunt was flying upside down.
Pangborn became so good at it that he actually wrote the word Pang across the top wing of his airplane so that he could advertise himself. He would flip over and fly upside down, and they would know that it was upside down Pangborn.
During the barnstorming days, we didn't have any regulations, except for the ones we made. The ships we flew were remodeled Army planes. The changes we made weren't copied from some textbook, but born out of our own hard-earned experience. 9 out of 10 pilots were good pilots. You had to be good in order to stay alive. And stunts, that was routine work then. Therefore, emergencies were routine.
Such a routine emergency was reported by the San Diego Sun.
Before a San Diego crowd predicted to surpass any that Coronado Beach has seen this season, Clyde Pangborn, acrobat of the air, his aviator partner Ralph Reed, and driver Al Lambla in his big Lozier will, this afternoon, stage a program of real thrills. The stunt, Never performed in aero history has Air Devil Pangborn leaping from the platform of Lambla's speeding car to a 12-foot rope ladder dangling from Reed's plane.
He had been hired by the big resort hotel, the Del Coronado, to do this stunt. And they practiced the stunt 3 or 4 times on their own and did it perfectly. And then the manager of the hotel said, well, guys, I know you're doing a great job, but it looks too easy, so I want you to make it harder.
Terrific speed, cool mastery of skill and daring. 2 whizzing mechanical monsters, one of the land, one of the air, will make the Otto airplane transfer a tensely dramatic spectacle. How it will end is beyond prediction.
In the process of making it look more challenging, they got out of sync from each other. And Pangborn, as he reached up and attempted to grab that ladder, missed and fell off the back of the car at 60 miles an hour.
Clyde E. Pangborn, Air Devil acrobat, was hurled to the hard sand of Coronado Beach this afternoon, was catapulted end over end for a distance of 60 feet, escaping death by a near miracle.
It's the fantastic Gates Flying Circus. See the world from the air with our master stunt pilots.
In 1921, Pangborn met promoter Ivan Gates. Together, they formed the Gates Flying Circus.
He was this very ostentatious, flamboyant character. He could whip up all sorts of enthusiasm by contacting newspaper reporters. He was a tremendous promoter.
Crowd stood spellbound in amazement. 40,000 people cultivated weak hearts and stiff necks. Crowds amazed at daring stunts.
The tremendous hunger in this country for people fascinated by airplanes and aviation. The Flying Circus put together this opportunity for the rest of the country to see these flyers.
The Gates Flying Circus grew and grew until in the late 20s. It was the largest such enterprise in the country.
They got to the point where they actually had a catalog of different stunts. You could buy and put together your own performance.
Sometimes, to give the local crowd an extra thrill, the Gates Flying Circus would hire a local fan, usually a good-looking woman, to make their first parachute jump over the hometown crowd. Usually a sure bet winner. But in Houston, Texas, they got more thrills than they bargained for. The excitement was captured in a 1938 radio drama called Men with Wings.
Welcome to WNBC Mutual Network Radio.
Men with Wings.
Oh, they are the men with wings. Courageous men with wings.
Men with Wings. The Mutual Radio Network presents the 8th broadcast in its cavalcade of aviation, dedicated to the people of the air, the Men with Wings.
When trouble's in the air, we'll beat the devils there. No, sir, not angels, just men with wings.
One story that's been told and retold is one of the most thrilling single incidents in aviation history. It happened in February 1924 in Houston, Texas. 25,000 spectators filled Ellington Airfield to see the famous barnstormers of the Gates Flying Circus. Little did they know that one of their own would soon be in danger. Tonight, we're going to relive that eventful day when pilot Clyde Pangborn rescued local girl Miss Rosalie Gordon.
Well, are we ready, Miss Gordon?
I think so, Mr. Pangborn.
Oh, you look lovely in your new flying costume, all white. Very charming.
I'll probably look like a sack of flour hanging down from an umbrella.
I beg your pardon. This is my mechanic, Milton Gurton. He's riding up front with you.
Glad to meet you, Miss Gordon. Are you ready to make your first parachute jump?
Yes, exciting, isn't it? Well, what do I do, Mr. Pangborn?
Well, all you have to do is climb out onto the wing and jump at the right moment. I'll signal you when, okay?
Okay.
So, what do you say, Miss Gordon? Shall we go up and start the show for the folks?
Well, I'm as ready as I'll ever be.
Climb in, Pang. I'll twist the prop.
Okay, Milt. Switch off.
Switch off. Okay. Contact.
Contact!
As the spectators watched, Clyde Pangborn climbed his plane quickly up into the skies. At 1,500 feet, Pangborn leveled off his plane.
This is it. You ready, Miss Gordon?
I am.
We're directly over the field now. See down there?
I see all right. Oh, it's quite a little drop, isn't it?
Okay, Miss Gordon. I'll climb out on the wing first, then I'll help you out. Give me your hand.
All right.
That's right. Keep a tight grip on what you're holding on to. This wind is pretty powerful right back of the propeller here. All right, come on.
Don't let her stand there long, Milt.
Okay, kid, now's the time. Just duck your head and jump.
You mean like this? See you on the ground!
Hey, she jumped.
What happened? Something's gone wrong.
Whoa, hold the ship steady, Pang. Good Lord, look below us. Her rope is caught on the undercarriage. She's hanging there in mid-air.
Meanwhile, on the ground, the crowd watches in horror.
What is happening?
She must have tangled in the wheels.
She's hanging down and being pulled along by the airplane.
Oh, how can Pangborn ever land her with her hanging down like that?
He can't. It would kill her. Ah! I can't watch this. I can't watch this. That girl will be killed. Oh! What's happened?
Up in Pangborn's plane, mechanic Milt Girton climbed down onto the landing gear. Frantically, he pulls on the rope connected to Miss Gordon, but the weight of the girl and the pull of the wind proved too much for him.
I can't do it, Pang. It's too much for me. We need at least 2 men to pull her in.
Oh, wait there, Milt. Let's get some help. Well, look over there. It's Tommy Thompson's plane with Freddie Lund. Let's get Freddie to jump onto our plane and help us.
Reading Pang's signal, A.L. Tommy Thompson jockeys his plane alongside Pangborn's ship. Freddie Lund, a daring wing walker, edges his way to the very tip of the wing, getting ready to jump to the wing of Pangborn's plane. Now, the airplanes are flying even, their wings almost touching, and Rosalie Gordon still swings helplessly below.
I can't hold him any longer. Jump over, Freddie.
Hold it steady, Pang. Here I come.
Well done, Freddie. You made it. Now go down and help Girton pull her in.
Trying their hardest, Lund and Girton still can't pull Miss Gordon in. Rapidly running out of fuel, Pangborn feels the desperateness of the situation. Pang knows that Miss Gordon will surely die if they're forced to land. Deciding to see if his strength can make the difference, Pangborn gives the controls over to Freddie Lund. Joining Girton underneath, Pangborn starts pulling in the rope, inch by inch, as Girton takes up the slack. Pulling with all their might, muscles burning from exhaustion, Pangborn's strength does the trick, bringing Miss Gordon to safety.
Oh, they got her. All right.
Is she still unconscious?
Yes, the poor thing's as limp as a rag. Milt Girton certainly has his hands full holding her onto the undercarriage.
Hey, wait a minute. How are they going to land if she's not in the cockpit?
That's what I'm worried about. Well, if anybody can land that ship without killing those two hanging on the landing gear, it's Clyde Pangborn.
Oh, no. I've seen about all this I want.
Well, that goes for me, too. Well, he's nosing her down into an easy glide, trying to land.
He'll never make it. It's impossible.
It is possible. It's got to be possible.
He made it. Pang made it. He landed. I knew he would.
Amazing. He's the greatest flyer I've ever seen.
The girl is saved. Pang did it. Clyde Pangborn saved her life.
By a miracle? By the will of the gods? By fate? But most of all, by being a superior aviator, a man of strength and will and courage, Clyde Pangborn landed his ship and showed extraordinary heroism in the air at the risk of his own life, above and beyond the call of honor. Aviators throughout the world respect Clyde Pangborn as one of America's greatest men with wings.
The Gates Flying Circus was the stuff of legends, and Pangborn was in the middle of it, doing what he loved, what he lived for, flying.
Taking part in the Gates Flying Circus was a real adventure, and The lifestyle that this entailed was really one of coming into a town, promoting it, putting on the show, and then picking everything up and taking off to the next city. So it was constantly on the move.
Even soaring high above, constantly on the move, Pangborn managed to stay rooted firmly on the ground. Strong family ties, especially with his mother, now living with Pang's brother in Wenatchee, Washington, kept him centered.
She was sort of the rock that was in one place that he could always come back to. He lived this sort of gypsy life and lived literally all over the country. And there was his mother at home in Wenatchee, and he could always count on her being there.
February 26, 1924, Galveston, Texas. Dear Mother, received your wire today. Yes, we had quite an exciting time for about 40 minutes a week ago Sunday.
I think that must have been a very close relationship. He wrote to her literally all his life, these wonderful letters.
Still close with love, Clyde. Regards to all.
Maybe it's the way you dress up at night. Maybe it's your face when you lose a fight. Maybe it's the season, but I don't need a reason to love you so.
He was also quite the ladies' man.
Pang, dear, somehow or other, the rumor has circulated that I am engaged to you. Of course, I denied it all, although it was difficult to do so.
He turned down marriage proposals. He refused to settle down. His brother Percy even bought him a farm, hoping that Pangborn would settle down, get married, have a normal life. But this adventure, this thrill of flying, the love of being up in the air clearly propelled him to make the choices that he ended up doing.
Here's hoping I shall see you again. Goodbye, darling. Fritz.
By the end of the decade, barnstorming crashed along with the stock market as new government regulations aimed to transform aviation from seat of the pants to serious transportation.
The man who recently stated the greatest hazard in aviation today is to keep from starving to death surely hit the nail on the head. Ivan Gates, 1930.
After 11 years, the fabled Gates Flying Circus quietly shut down. Pang later writes fondly of those almost forgotten creatures, the barnstorming pilot.
He has done his bit towards the advancement of aviation. He's made mistakes, and plenty of them. But his exploits will never again be duplicated. He has pioneered aviation in every nook and cranny of this country. He gave thousands of persons their first taste of flying. He has given freely, and as a class, he was a real flying man.
A major chapter in Pangborn's life had come to an end, but aviation was still young, and there were records to set and legends to create.
The Graf Zeppelin is the fastest in the world, successfully completing its historic flight in only 21 days, breaking the around-the-world airspeed record.
There was a real drive to become the first at something. It was a time period when you could be the first at just about anything you identified. And so there's a real spark going on, an excitement, really in the world, in trying to do things that had never been done before.
Records were being set. History was being written.
There was the hero Lindbergh, who took his Spirit of St. Louis across the ocean to Paris non-stop.
Lindbergh had conquered the Atlantic. The Graf Zeppelin had flown non-stop around the world. It took 21 days to do it, a record, but one that could fall.
Aviators knew that they could beat this around-the-world time.
What is the object of your flight, boys? Well, we want to beat the record of Graf Zeppelin in 21 days. 21 days.
The ink was barely dry on the Zeppelin's record when Americans set out to break it. Wiley Post and Harold Gatty, noted aviators in their own right, joined forces to challenge the world record. Just as determined was Clyde Pangborn, who teamed up with playboy Hugh Herndon Jr. Herndon, better known in society circles than aviation circles, was the son of Standard Oil heiress Alice Boardman.
His mother agreed to put up the money that was necessary for this round-the-world flight.
A strange marriage. The two of them are not an awful lot alike, but I think they needed each other. Herndon needed Pangborn's skills and abilities, and Pangborn needed the backing to make this thing happen.
What was required was a great deal of planning, some financial resources to buy the plane, set up the refueling, do the permits and everything else.
The Around the World Corporation, ATW, was formed with Pangborn, Herndon, and R.J. Huebner, who would run things on the ground while the aviators were aloft. The company's first order of business was buying an airplane. For Pangborn, there was only one plane for the job, the Bellanca Skyrocket long-distance model J3 monoplane. They named it the Miss Vidal, after an oil and gas subsidiary of Standard Oil.
Bellanca designed very, very stable, strong, heavy-lift aircraft. They were the state-of-the-art at the time period.
Pangborn worked closely with Giuseppe Bellanca, modifying the plane for long-distance travel.
Clyde Pangborn ordered the airplane special from the factory. They had some modifications done to it. One, they had a large fuel tank installed in the fuselage, and they asked for longer wings to give you a longer wingspan, a little more lift.
He was involved in the actual building of the airplane and oversaw the construction of the tanks, and I'm sure they were part of his design. The airplane had big gas tanks in the wings, and it had a 165-gallon belly tank that was added on underneath the fuselage, and then it had a 50-gallon chin tank that was added ahead of the landing gear.
Miss Vidal was meant to take advantage of the latest ideas in aviation.
There was a lot of learning going on. Every year a new model came out, and it wasn't just improving upon a design, it was new materials that came available, new engines, new ideas on airfoil shapes.
Designed to be as light as possible, Miss Vidal was built without doors or side windows. Pilots had to crawl in through the front windows. Behind the cockpit, a huge fuel tank filled the interior, leaving only a small area in the back for supplies. Progress was steady, but agonizingly slow.
Sunday, June 21st, 1931, Hartford, Connecticut. Dear Mother, I came back here in March, as you know, and things have been progressing slowly, but things are shaping up and are about ready to go. When I arrived...
Finally, Miss Vidal, fully loaded with fuel, was ready for a flight test at New York's Roosevelt Field.
It's soggy weather at Roosevelt Field in New York as aviators Clyde Pangborn and Hugh Herndon test their heavily laden Bellanca monoplane, the Miss Vidal. The runway, the shorter of the two at Roosevelt Field, is the same one on which French flyer René Franck's ship failed to gain takeoff speed, crashing over the embankment, killing two of his crew in the ensuing fire.
Roosevelt Field had two runways. Both of them were grass runways, and it had been raining, it was soggy, and they tried to take off from the short upper runway.
As the crowd held their collective breath, the overweight Miss Vidal struggled to get off the ground. Will the shorter runway be long enough?
The short upper runway wasn't sufficient. They got the airplane up to speed. They couldn't stop. They couldn't do anything. And this airplane was equipped with two 8-inch dump valves, which would empty the tank out fairly fast. And they pulled the dump valves to jettison the fuel as fast as they could.
Gallons of fuel flooded the runway as Pangborn lightened the load to escape disaster. Limping up into the air, the Miss Vidal barely missed a hangar, gaining lift.
And he was just able to limp it into the air and mush his way on down and land on the lower runway.
Surely, Pangborn and Herndon will use the longer runway in their next attempt.
The failed test flight wasn't the only setback. By late June 1931, with Miss Vidal still undergoing tests and ATW still working on overseas landing permits, Wiley Post and Harold Gatty trumped everyone.
Wiley Post, Harold Gatty, and the world. It's June 24th, 1931, as speedy airship Winnie Mae leaves runway at Roosevelt Field, Long Island, in attempt to circle the globe. Today is ended and darkness is gathering in tonight over Long Island's Roosevelt Field as the Winnie Mae comes in. 8 days, 15 hours, 51 minutes, and 16,000 miles since takeoff time, Post and Gatty have circled the globe. Its new round-the-world record, 4 days better than the historic flights of the German Zeppelin.
The Zeppelin's record had fallen. Post and Gatty now held the record to beat. A month later, Pangborn and Herndon were ready, and they chose the Northern Circle route around the world.
How are you going to find your way across the water? Well, I'm going to use a sextant and chronometer and navigate my way to Moscow. Moscow? Yes. First stop. First stop. What route are you going to follow from Moscow? From Moscow, we're going to follow the Trans-Siberian Railway across Siberia into Vladivostok. From Vladivostok, we'll follow the southern coast of Siberia into Nome, Alaska. From Nome, we'll come down through Canada into Edmonton and on into Chicago, and from there on into New York. That's going to be some trip. How many gallons of gas will this ship hold? 800 gallons. 800 gallons. Well, good luck to you, boys. Thank you. Thank you.
On July 28th, the famed weather advisor, Dr. Kimball, gave Pangborn and Herndon a thumbs up for takeoff.
I wish you all the best of luck, a great flight for both of you. Thank you, Doctor.
Pangborn and Herndon weren't the only ones chasing a record that day. Ironically, another team left for Turkey in an attempt to break the record for the world's longest flight. It was still the golden age of aviation. Only 11 non-stop flights had successfully crossed the Atlantic by that day. Now, number 12 would head for Turkey. Miss Vidal would be lucky 13.
The number 13 has always been a lucky one for her son, Mrs. Pangborn recalled. Let's hope it's lucky for Pangborn and Herndon as they fly the 13th plane eastward across the Atlantic.
The flight to Turkey took off at 5:59 a.m.
Boardman and Philando, weighted down by 800 gallons of gasoline, a load of almost 3 tons, are off on the perilous run down the field, straining every nerve to raise the heavy ship. Now up, now down. At last, they make it.
19 minutes later, the Miss Vidal lumbered down the runway.
And Herndon and Pangborn, hardly able to rise, are away in their heavily laden ship.
Aloft, the aviators soon encountered heavy fog and strong headwinds, making navigation tough and the flight slower than planned. Lucky 13 appeared not to be so lucky after all.
The Wenatchee World newspaper reported that Mrs. Pangborn is not worried that around-the-world aviators Clyde Pangborn and Hugh Herndon have been unheard of for 36 hours. I haven't lost a second's sleep, she answered.
The world watched and waited, and finally word came that Miss Vidal had crossed the Atlantic, landing in a farmer's field in Wales.
The New York offices of Hugh Herndon Jr. and Clyde Pangborn, round-the-world flyers, late today received a cable message from Morley Grove, Pembrokeshire, Wales, saying, "Cross the Atlantic safely. Inform family."
We had a very good trip, except we had fog all the way, and Pangborn flew blind through it for an hour and a half when we at the start, until we got above it. Had to climb, how high was it? About from 4,000 to 14,000. Your next hop is where? Berlin? Berlin, yes. Want to get the weather report? Or are you going on to Moscow?
We're going to get some more gas at Berlin on the kind of the smallness of the figure. We can't take enough with enough load, you see.
Yes.
And get a little more gas there and get a weather report and go on to Moscow tonight.
Yes.
Clyde E. Pangborn and Hugh Herndon Jr. hurrying around the world left England's Croydon Airdome today at 2:13 p.m. for Berlin and Moscow. After a difficult flight across the Atlantic, they took only a few hours' sleep and then pushed on, doubtful of beating the Post and Gatty record of 8 days and 16 hours, but still hoping to make it in 9. The flyers started to taxi and left the ground in 2 minutes for a perfect takeoff. The crowd, which numbered only about 250, watched them circle the field and disappear in the clouds. Visibility was poor and the wind was strong.
By the time Miss Vidal reached Moscow, their position was difficult at best. Pangborn and Herndon were almost 10 full hours behind Post and Gaddy.
Two American world flyers hurrying across Siberia in a race for a new record were believed speeding over the desolate eastern stretches of North Asia today toward Khabarovsk.
They came down in Khabarovsk, Siberia, in a tremendous rainstorm. And the landing field there had become very muddy, and the Miss Vidal had skidded off the runway and become mired in the mud.
After 950 miles, rain, fog, and a perilous landing that damaged one wing, Miss Vidal was hopelessly stuck, and Pangborn and Herndon were hopelessly behind. Hundreds of Russians used ropes to pull Miss Vidal out of the mud and into a hangar for repairs. Pangborn and Herndon came to grips with the reality of their situation.
Disappointed in defeat, the two American flyers rested in Khabarovsk today. Their chances to lower the Post-Gaddy record definitely lost.
In the isolation of Siberia, Pangborn and Herndon reconciled the thousands of dollars spent, thousands of miles flown, countless risks taken, against a prize that would not be theirs. If there was a sense of defeat, it didn't last long. There was a major world record yet unclaimed, an extremely challenging one, the first non-stop flight across the Pacific. Japan's Asahi newspaper put up a $25,000 prize for the first non-stop flight. Pangborn jumped at the challenge.
The New York headquarters of Clyde Pangborn and Hugh Herndon Jr., American flyers who hopped from New York July 28th, reported the aviators telegraphed they had abandoned their attempt to break the record of Wiley Post and Harold Gaddy and decided to try a non-stop flight from Tokyo to Seattle.
From Siberia, Pangborn cabled the editor of the English-language Japanese Times, in effect asking for directions and asking that the U.S. Embassy obtain landing permission from the Japanese government. Impatient waiting for a reply, Pangborn and Herndon simply took off, flying the Miss Vidal on a southeasterly heading toward Tokyo, Japan. It was a time of isolationism and profound suspicion, even perhaps the early stages of preparations for war. When Miss Vidal landed, Pangborn and Herndon were immediately arrested as spies.
It's August 1931, and round-the-world airplane Miss Vidal lands at Tokyo Airport with its two occupants under arrest by Japanese government. But Japanese girls bring flowers to Americans Clyde Pangborn and Hugh Herndon, for it doesn't matter to them that pilots flew forbidden air over secret Jap fortifications.
One of the most incriminating bits of evidence in the Japanese authorities' minds was that Herndon, as it turned out, had taken pictures and some film of Japanese military installations.
Hugh Herndon Jr. may face prosecution for reportedly having taken photographs over Japanese fortifications. This is an offense punishable under Japanese law if investigated.
We were arraigned on 3 counts: that we had flown over Japan without a permit, that we had flown over fortified areas, and that we had photographed those areas. Now, true, we didn't have a permit with us, but we had assumed that it would be routine for our embassy to arrange it.
The incident soon took on international proportions.
The spy story started within an hour after the flyers came to Earth in Japan, and during the days of grilling questioning they underwent at the hands of police, the talks grew to alarming proportions, fanned by the suspicions of American motives and the rantings of nationalist newspapers.
Now, we weren't jailed, but we were restricted in our movements. We had to be escorted everywhere, and we were subjected to endless questioning, most of which was ridiculous.
The film was confiscated. They were charged with espionage. They were jailed. It started to become an international incident. The U.S. State Department was involved.
Clyde's brother Percy anxiously wrote the ATW Corporation, demanding to know why more was not being done to win their release.
Dear Mr. Pangborn, the reason you haven't seen more in the papers is that the State Department asked us to help them by not arousing an anti-Japanese feeling here in the States. There is a very bad political situation in Japan at this time.
It seems to me there's a tremendous dichotomy in Japan at this particular time. There are those within the Japanese community who want Japan as part of the world, and that there are those in the Japanese community who want to isolate Japan.
They spent 56 days under house arrest and surveillance. It was a difficult time the aviators passed by modifying Miss Vidal for a Transpacific crossing. Pangborn and Herndon were finally freed, and they had permission to attempt the Transpacific flight. They immediately flew north to Sabashiro Beach. The beach had been set up as a runway by the people of nearby Misawa and had been used many times by aviators attempting the Transpacific flight.
They had packed the sand of the beach down, and they built a ramp at one end of the beach so that the airplanes could start on the ramp.
The people of Misawa had warmly welcomed aviators attempting the Transpacific flight, and Pangborn and Herndon were no exception.
They welcomed the two aviators with open arms and gave them every assistance that they could. They got a different view of what the Japanese people were like. By the time they left there, they had made quite a few friends and had become very enamored of the Japanese people.
Pangborn knew the crossing would be risky. He added fuel tanks, skid underbelly, and rigged a way to drop the landing gear.
Pangborn understood that to reach America he would have to jettison the landing gear, that the landing gear weighed hundreds of pounds, and it also created a tremendous amount of drag.
Studying the problem, I calculated that we could increase our speed by 15 miles per hour if we could rid ourselves of the drag of the fixed landing gear. Now, on a 40-hour flight, that would be the equivalent of adding 600 miles to our range, which might be the difference between success and failure.
On the morning of October 2nd, 1931, the unlikely pair were good to go. Pang, dressed in Japanese coveralls, 2 pair of heavy wool socks, and no shoes. Herndon, ever the dapper playboy, wore heavy slacks, a flight jacket, and Oxfords. A very overweight Miss Vidal was rolled to the top of the ramp.
They were well in excess of 9,000 pounds when they took off from Sabashiro Beach. They were carrying 915 gallons of gasoline. It was one big flying gas tank.
Hundreds lined Sabashiro Beach to watch. The Pratt & Whitney engine roared to life, and Miss Vidal began lumbering down the 1.5-mile-long beach runway.
It must have been a tremendous feat of luck to even get off the beach at Sabashiro. We know that Pangborn and Herndon came within several hundred yards of hitting these logs at the end of the beach.
They were over 100 miles an hour before they were actually able to get it off the ground, and then they were just in what's called ground effect, where you're floating along over the cushion of air that builds up underneath the wings.
He was flying for miles with that just off the ground wallowy feel that the plane does when it's overloaded and it's barely flying.
I felt I had physically lifted it from the sand. I was determined to take off or pile into those logs. We had permission for one attempt, and in no way was I going to spend any more time in Japan.
The Miss Vidal gained only a few feet of altitude every minute. The course would take them over the Aleutian Chain, across the Gulf of Alaska, down over Queen Charlotte Islands off the coast of British Columbia, and into the United States. Out over the Pacific, Pang pulled the cable to drop the landing gear. The wheels released, but 2 struts didn't, making a belly landing, any landing, impossible.
So Pangborn, drawing on his skills from his days in the flying circus, actually went out onto the wing and manually released the landing gear struts from the outside.
Over the North Pacific in sub-freezing air, with no parachute, got out there and removed the landing gear struts that had hung up. He didn't even have shoes on.
Climbing to over 14,000 feet to pick up the tailwinds, the Barnstormer and Playboy braced for the long flight.
It was very uncomfortable, I'm sure. Very cold, no heater. Even the tea they took froze.
It was just a tremendous physical undertaking because here they are in their plane with no pressurized cabins or the comforts that we think of today.
Pangborn, for efficiency, typically flew at 15,000 feet without oxygen. The higher you fly, the more efficient your airplane and the better tailwinds you have also, and Pangborn understood that. Most people would be affected flying at 15,000 feet without oxygen. I know when I fly at 14,000, 15,000 feet for very long, I eventually have a splitting headache, and I'm glad I don't have to do any algebra. I know that I'm fairly impaired at that altitude. And Pangborn seemed to flourish at that altitude, like some people do, like great mountain climbers are able to function. And Herndon didn't.
In the Miss Vidal, fuel had to be pumped manually from one tank to another to keep fuel constantly flowing to the engine. It was a difficult and complicated job, and it was Herndon's to do. Maybe it was a lack of oxygen, but Herndon made a near-fatal mistake.
Hugh Herndon allowed them to run out of gas.
Over the Pacific, with no hope of rescue if they crashed into the sea, Pangborn was forced to dive the plane in pitch darkness to keep the propeller rotating, while Herndon desperately worked to prime the fuel lines.
And during that period of time, Hugh would be switching all of the different valves and frantically pumping fuel into the wing tanks where it could then again trickle down to the engine. They'd windmill down to within a few hundred feet of the ocean before the engine would catch again.
Maybe Lucky 13 was lucky after all, because they made it through the night. By morning, they were off the coast of British Columbia and headed for their final destination, Seattle, Washington. But along the way, fog forced a change in course.
This was a cold October morning when we heard that the plane was possibly going to land at Wenatchee.
His mother lived here and his brother was a jeweler in town.
They kept telling us that Seattle was trying to get him to land in Seattle. And then when I looked around and saw his mother, I knew he would not land in Seattle.
We heard the plane and we saw it coming in, and I'll never forget my dad yelled at my mother, "Bernice," he said, "there's no wheels on it."
I remember vividly the landing. He came in, there were no wheels on the plane, and the propeller was horizontal.
Everybody was real quiet.
I thought it was sure going to clear on over to it on his back.
All of a sudden, everybody started running up there.
On October 5th, 1931, after 41 hours in the air, Clyde Pangborn and Hugh Herndon were first to cross the Pacific non-stop.
The man who covered it, Carl Cleveland, was one of our reporters, and he went up early in the morning and staked out the only telephone booth that was there.
There he is on the ground and sliding along in a cloud of dust.
He was on the telephone to our office, and our office was on the telephone to the Associated Press in San Francisco. He was the link to the rest of the world.
Within an hour or so, a very, very rare occurrence took place in Wenatchee from the communication standpoint. The Wenatchee Daily World published an extra, and there were little boys all over town selling these extras, and the big headline was, "Pangborn and Herndon land."
It really put Wenatchee on the map.
First telegram opened by Herndon was from his mother in New York. He did not divulge the contents, but smiled happily as he read a few short words.
They were taken down to the Cascadian Hotel down here, and they finally got a bath and something to eat.
The Flyers went to bed at 10:30 a.m. after having had baths and a breakfast of baked apples, ham, and eggs.
On behalf of the people of Wenatchee and the people of the United States,
We want to tell you how happy we are to have you in our apple capital of the world. Mr. Herndon, how did you feel about flying over the ocean?
Well, after leaving Sabashiro Beach, we flew for about 4 hours and were fairly comfortable. We dropped our landing gear by that time, and from then on we started to climb. And it kept getting colder and colder, and we began feeling the cold too, and didn't really realize how cold it was until we went to get a drink of water from one of our canteens and found the water frozen in them. We knew then how cold it was. We had dropped the landing gear on the way across, of course, and we had to prepare for a bang when we landed. We had a few ropes tied in there to hang on to, one thing or another. And even with this preparation, we both got a couple of bumps. Mr. Herndon got his eye cut, and I broke the windshield to the back of my head. I was fortunate in turning my head backwards, or probably had my nose broke.
Thousands of people line the streets of Seattle today, cheering aviator heroes Clyde Pangborn and Hugh Herndon, who have successfully crossed the Pacific Ocean non-stop, winning a $25,000 prize. To the cheers of well-wishers, the boys talk to the crowd.
We wrote several notes back and forth to each other, to whether we'd land in Seattle or not. But finally decided that since it was about 3:30 in the morning, that if we did land, we'd wake everybody up. So we did.
It's on to New York for aviators Clyde Pangborn and Hugh Herndon to finish what they started 3 months ago.
A great many thrills. And one of the thrills I've been looking forward to is meeting the mayor of New York.
For a time, the accolades were as thick as confetti. But over time, perhaps because of the Depression or the outbreak of World War II, one of the greatest achievements in the history of aviation faded from view. Pang kept pushing the envelope, competing in air races from England to Australia. During the war, he helped organize and run the Ferry Command, and Pang personally made 170 Atlantic crossings to deliver planes to England. After the war, he became a test pilot. Herndon, more playboy than pilot, disappeared from public view. Today, there is at least one enduring legacy of the achievement: strong ties between Massawa and Wenatchee, and now East Wenatchee.
The sister city relationship with Massawa has been wonderful. Since 1981, we've been celebrating this and enjoying this interchange.
Massawa has always sent a delegation to our Apple Blossom Festival to represent their community, and we send a delegation to Massawa.
Cultural exchange, I mean, what a great experience for our kids. Educationally, they send us master teachers. We set up pen pal exchanges. If nothing else, it teaches them the story of Pangborn.
A large sculpture rests on Sabashiro Beach where the Pangborn flight took off. And somehow the memory of that flight has lived on in the collective consciousness of all of these people in Massawa. That flight captures their imagination.
Pangborn's life has inspired a group of Wenatchee aviators, the Spirit of Wenatchee, to build a replica of the Miss V-Doll, and they plan to duplicate the 1931 around-the-world flight.
All of us on the committee are pilots. It is so much fun to fly, and it is such a grand opportunity to participate with a group to do something historic, and the excitement that that will generate for small airplanes, general aviation, it's irresistible.
It's a wonderful thing for us. America has always needed its heroes, and I guess these are Wenatchee's heroes.
It's hoped the trip will rekindle excitement over the first Transpacific flight and give Pangborn at least a measure of the stature afforded other great aviators.
Wenatchee declares a holiday to see Pangborn and Herndon slide into home base. Everybody dropped everything and made a beeline to the airport.
This was a tremendous accomplishment.
They were the Mercury astronauts of their day. Clyde Pangborn had 28,000 hours of flying and had never lost an airplane or harmed a passenger. He had skills that were way out there at the edge of what people could do. He was very proud of what he did.
We throw this word around, hero, but I think he probably qualifies. He was a true American hero.
Sing a song all day long. Can't go wrong when you sing a song. Every little bluebird will sing along. Every little care would be gone. So sing a song all day long. Can't go wrong when you sing a song. All your little problems in life are gone if you just sing a song.
We had fog all the way. Pangborn flew blind through it for an hour and a half.
Miss Vidal lands at Tokyo Airport with its 2 occupants under arrest.
The landing gear was dropped in the ocean to increase speed and conserve the fuel, but the boys made a pretty good landing at that.
How do you feel since we heard the boys took off from Tokyo and landed at Wenatchee safely? I can't believe it yet. We've waited so long, over 2 months now. We worry all the time that they finally made it just as they said they would. It's too wonderful.
Sing a song all day long. Can't go wrong when you sing a song. Every little bluebird will sing along. Every little care would be gone.
This program was made possible by the contributions of viewers like you, the Friends of Seven. Thank you. Additional funds provided by the Reynolds Alberta Museum, presenting an outstanding collection of vehicles, aircraft, agricultural equipment, and industrial giants.